Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Carlson, and you are listening to the Bluegrass Sports Performance Podcast. Today we are talking with Coach John Delf-Montgomery, head strength and conditioning coach at Piedmont University. Coach, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So you are going to be my official first interview of a small college. So for some of those that don't know, when I started this podcast, I was in the high school realm. I'm in the process of transitioning into the small college sector again at Center College. And Coach is one that I've kind of followed for a while now. And so he was one of the first people I reached out to. I want to start incorporating some of, not only continue to highlight the high school, but highlight some of our small colleges. So before we dive into your programming, where you're at, all those things, talk to us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me on. So like many small college strength and conditioning coaches, I think my path to where I'm currently at is a little untraditional. So I went to a Division III school, Berry College, where I played football and basketball. When my career came to an end, kind of throughout that whole time, I kind of got a late jump to the strength and conditioning game. I went in my summer of my junior year. Finished up my junior year, so the summer before I started my senior season, went to the University of New Mexico for an internship. Basically, I just wanted to figure out real fast if this was something that I wanted to do or didn't want to do. I always think that's a great idea when I've talked to like interns and other young coaches is you'll know if you're cut out for this basically on day one. So I put myself in a different environment, kind of away from anybody and everybody to make sure I was really focused to see if this was something that I wanted to do. Like most, fell in love with it, came back, had an awesome senior year at Berry College. And then kind of throughout that time, along with my two roommates who also got into strength and conditioning, we kind of became a de facto strength and conditioning department because at Berry College, there was no department. We had an unbelievable mentor, Coach Masters, who's actually the defense coordinator at the University of West Georgia. He was our strength and conditioning coordinator for football and just poured absolutely everything into us. So, I mean, obviously very indebted for that and allowing us to kind of step in. And I mean, we weren't just training like your kind of typical like tennis, golf, the sports that we can kind of throw anything at and we'll see some benefit and some success from. I mean, we were training football in the spring. We were training basketballs. We were training softball, which is nationally ranked. I mean, we were training them all. And it was a great time. We obviously got a massive amount of experience from that. And then when I graduated, I spent 6 months at Shorter University, which was a school in that same town. Ironically, I told my now wife, I gave myself July 14th as a deadline because at the time, I mean, I was applying to anything and everything and wasn't really hearing back from much. And a week from that deadline, I finally got the call. And then my first day was actually that July 14th date. So it's kind of ironic how that all works. And then 6 months later, found myself in Illinois at the University of Illinois Springfield as the first ever assistant strength coach there under Chris Lowe, who, I mean, was somebody who really, again, poured a lot of information into for me and, you know, allowed me to kind of grow. And the conversations that we had from a strength conditioning perspective was fantastic. So there were some where, you know, I was kind of coached very old school. So there were some things from a kind of new practices way that I never really thought of. And having somebody like him who was comfortable enough to challenge kind of me to think that process through is kind of the reason I am the coach I am today. When I was at Shorter University, I was working underneath Trey Kilgore, who's now the men's basketball strength coach at Samford. Just want to make sure to give those people their shout outs. Mm-hmm. And then after a year and 9 months at the University of Illinois Springfield, I had an awesome opportunity to kind of jump into a private sector gig that was basically kind of a grassroots start from scratch. So for me, I've always kind of been the start from scratch, kind of do it from the ground up. From high school to being at Berry, I was the second ever graduating senior class. And then at Shorter, at UIS, and then at High Performance Company in Springfield, Illinois. And then finally had a really awesome opportunity to come back home to Piedmont University, which is a Division III school here in Demorest, Georgia, which is kind of in a unique area in the northeast part of Georgia, hour and a half from Atlanta, 45 minutes from Clemson, and about 2 hours from Knoxville. So, or 3 hours from Knoxville. So kind of a nice little honey hole area where I was the first ever head strength and conditioning coach here. With now 480 athletes, 22 sports. So it's it's ironic because I was talking to a coach the other day. I've hit my fifth year in the industry now. And it's interesting when I look back when I was at the University of New Mexico, we made a 5-year plan. My 5-year plan was to be a head strength coach. So I'm sitting here achieving my 5-year goal. And now I'm looking at it and, what's next. So that's been a really cool kind of, to see the fruits of the labor over 5 years. Obviously, you don't really think of those types of things on a day-to-day basis, but when you pull back and look at it from a wider lens, it was kind of I'm essentially living my dream right now. So super special.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got a few things to pull out from there. First one, kind of just a funny one, is apparently whatever date you set, it seems to work really well for you. So I don't know if I can get on the train of like, we're going to win the lottery here in about 5 years, that would be great. Let's have you put that in stone, because it seems to be working, that your plans, whether it be July 14th or 5 years down the road, seems like you're hitting them there. But I think that's, again, a lot of credit to you and being able to put in the hard work to be able to get yourself into those positions. I say it facetiously, but there's a lot of truth behind it, where you're working very hard to make it a reality for yourself. So the second thing I want to kind of pull out is you talked about two experiences, right? So one was your opportunity at Berry. So I guess, because you graduated, what year did you graduate at Berry?
2018.
2018. So we would have, I went to Center College, and for those, if you want to go small schools in the Southeast, so Berry and Center are in the same conference. So when Coach was graduating, I was finishing up my first full year as the head strength coach there. And it's not in our world that we live in the SAA and where Piedmont is, it's not unrealistic to think that these Division III schools are getting their first strength and conditioning coaches. Again, I was the first at Center. Berry has a similar situation. Millsaps recently got one in the past 5 years. Piedmont, the one that you're starting up, just got started, and it's interesting to see how that's all going. But what I want to pull out is, so you said you were football, basketball. What made you eventually really starting to want to dive into strength and conditioning more as your athletic career started to come to a close?
Yeah, well, it's ironic because I kind of always tell people initially it was because I found out I could wear sweatpants and a t-shirt every day to work. So that was, for me, was kind of a rad idea. But joking aside, for me, it was in high school, I was always playing sports, and I never really had an opportunity for an off season. I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school, like many other kids do. Finally got to college and really locked in on football my first 4 years, and then I played basketball my senior year. And for me, we were really bad my first year, and I mean really bad. So when we got done with that year, we kind of sat down and we figured out where is going to be the difference for us. And for us, it was in the weight room, and that's where we kind of came together as freshmen and sophomores at the time. We were playing against 22-year-old developed grown men. So we figured we had to grow and develop fast if we wanted to be successful, because that was our plan. And our coaches basically demanded that was the plan as well, because they have very high expectations. And then obviously fast forward 4 years later, I won 2 conference championships in football and then a conference championship in basketball. And again, a lot of that came down to the work that we did in the weight room. And obviously to see that blossom was something that I kind of fell in love with and never wanted to do anything else ever again.
Yeah. So fun. I think if I've got my years correct, were you part of the basketball team that won? That was the 8th seed coming in that ended up winning. You won it on
Yep.
Center's Court, right? Okay. So I that was my first year. So I do remember I was working with the men's basketball team, and they were very excited to be able to host it because they won conference that year with the number 1 seed, and you guys came in and knocked them off. So, and again, credit to Barry. Again, for those that don't know, Barry made a transition from NAIA to Division III. It was when I was in school, 2013, 12, somewhere around there. And they added programs and did a lot of good things. And I was just commenting to Coach before we got on. I was just watching their softball team is up here right now playing against ours, and they're now ranked as one of the best programs in the nation. So it's been great to see the growth that Barry's been able to have down there. So, okay, next thing I wanted to pull out kind of from your backstory is how did you get set up with your New Mexico state situation, right? Is that something that you reached out? Again, part of this podcast is trying to help coaches that are on the younger side be able to grow and develop. And, we may have some people that listen to this that are trying to look for some of those internships. You were looking from Georgia. How did you get yourself all the way out to New Mexico?
Yeah, well, for me, Coach Masters basically told my roommates and I, if we really were invested in this, then we needed to put a little skin in the game. So we went and all got our USAW certification, and I think that kind of helped us from the next step, where, I mean, like most coaches do, apply to about probably 300 different places. And in being a Division III athlete, it seemed to be a little more difficult, because it wasn't like the Barry B meant much as it did in Rome, Georgia, as it does across the country. So luckily, again, kind of fell into a situation at the University of New Mexico where Coach Ryan Grubb and Coach John McWilliams and Coach Armin Satchel allowed me to come in. And for me, I had a family friend in the area who they were gone all summer and they needed someone to feed the dogs. So I booked a one-way ticket out there and took advantage of that opportunity, obviously, because I wanted to see what it looked like. Because again, at Barry, we didn't have that department. I mean, again, we had a great situation with Coach Masters there, but I wanted to see what it looked like from the perspective of this was their full-time job. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing from the times where teams aren't coming in? What does that look like from a preparation standpoint? What's the behind the scenes things look like? Because as interns, that's what you're doing for most of your work, is the behind the scenes work. So I wanted to know and feel and see what that was like before I just jumped in and again, drug my poor now wife across the country. And if it wasn't for her, I don't know if it would have been possible, because I know she probably put up with more than she bargained for, but so indebted for that. So for me, the process was simple. Just I got my USAW, applied, finally heard back from one and jumped in head first.
Love it. And what was a big major takeaway that you did learn from that experience?
Yeah, well, for me, so at the University of New Mexico, we had there were 3 full-time coaches, and then there were 4 of us interns. So I had a lot of experience hands-on with how we trained there. Was we each kind of had a pod of racks where we would take, each of us would have 2, and we would take those, 8 to 10 guys through their program 3-4 times a day between the groups. And it was, for me, it was just to see the high level process of what it looks like when we started with speed work and GPP and stuff like that in the indoor, on the field. And then the small things too, like, so Bob Davey was the head coach at the time. And at the University of Mexico, all the water is kind of controlled by the reservations. So it's funny because there's not a lot of grass in the area. There's the golf course, which is controlled by the reservation. And then there's 2 practice fields at New Mexico that are grass. I mean, those are pretty much the only kind of public grass areas. And Coach Davey was super particular, because I'm sure he spent an absurd amount of money to make sure that those got watered. And it was small things like that. I mean, again, they told us all the time, you have to be able to prepare for rain. And what they meant by that was not actual physical rain, but when Coach would walk in and be like, hey, it looks like that end zone's getting a little chewed up. You might want to take all that stuff and move it 10 yards down the opposite direction to the other end zone. So again, at the time as an intern, we're like, well, this is stupid. Like, why would we be moving the corners of the field? But then again, zoom back and look at it from a administrative standpoint. That was something that was important to him. So I wanted to know what all those things were like, and to see that at a high level, at the Division I level, even though it was a kind of more of a group of five feel. I mean, it was a high level. We moved around a whole lot with who we had, and they won a conference championship that year. So it was kind of it was a cool process to see those guys throughout the year kind of blossom.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I gotta imagine, and we all have those stories where we were an intern or we did some type of intern work. And you're right in your initial comments that you made while you were going through it. When you dive in with 2 feet and you really see if this is something that you're going to like, you find out really quickly if you like it or not, right? And I did the same thing while I was here at center for my first year. I dove in with both feet and probably coached more than I ever did. But man, I figured out right away that it was something that I absolutely love to do, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else from it. So okay, so let's start turning our attention, right? So we get through the younger years, and then we start applying for jobs. What did that process look like for you as you were starting to get out of Berry, start applying for jobs, GA-ships, different things like that?
Yeah. So for shorter, again, like many Division III kids, probably applied to about 200 different programs. And it's ironic, and it's something that I'll never forget. A lot of times as a strength coach, you never hear back as far as either not getting the job or getting the job, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times you apply and you twiddle your thumbs and then you go, I guess I didn't get it. So for me, I'll never forget, I actually had the football coach at the University of St. Thomas, which was the team who beat me my senior year in the playoffs when we went up there. They had a GA job at the time for strength conditioning, and they were Division III at the time, and then now they're the Division I level. But he actually responded back on a personal email, which again, that's something that he definitely didn't have to do, and probably did it not knowing what the impact was from that perspective. But that kind of imprinted on me that St. Thomas for the Division III level at the time, they were the kind of gold standard. So the fact that somebody like that is reaching out to somebody, that it was important enough for him to do that. That's something that kind of stuck with me. And that's something that I kind of also make sure I'm always at the very least responding to those who reach out. And I think that's kind of why I jumped into helping out with the Strength Coach Job Network on the Discord, was because that was something that, again, it's easy to kind of, shoot messages to people or talk about topics. So that's something that I always kind of think about in the back of my mind, like, what are those people who are at the very top doing? And that's what they're doing. It's important enough for them to respond. And even though the response was no, it was still something that, again, imprinted on me. So again, kind of got really lucky at the university at Shorter with their GA. And again, it's very unique, kind of like many Division II GAs. All it offered was really the tuition waiver and then the opportunity to work with their athletes. So kind of had to find a way to make ends meet there for a little bit. And then when I went to the University of Illinois, it was more of it was an assistant job where I was getting paid a stipend. But it was kind of like a glorified GA, where most of the benefit came from the tuition waiver, where I was able to get my master's in education. So that was a way for me to finish that up, but then also to put maybe a couple pieces of bread on the table every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, again, where my wife came in.
Oh, yeah.
He was a trooper.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So then that gets us to where you are now. So talk to us a little bit about how you heard about it, about the job opening up, how the interview process went, and then let's start expanding about your roles at Piedmont there.
Yeah. So again, it's kind of ironic. July 4th, 2019, I was with Coach Kilgore at his parents' house, and we were doing a typical COVID driveway workout. And the assistant lacrosse coach at Piedmont University, Ryan McKay, was there with us. And he was driving. It was funny, again, flashbacks, but he was driving a Piedmont recruiting car. He was getting ready to drive down and do some recruiting. And he was talking to me that day about, hey, you know, there's a possibility. There's been a lot of chatter about starting strength and conditioning. And I was, you know, kind of at first like, we'll see. I don't know if I'll, you know, ever make it back down south. But one thing led to another, and almost a year to that date, they did actually open up that job. And I applied right away, obviously, because that's something that I knew school-wise, because growing up, I went to Greg Neely, who's the basketball coach there, had his first ever basketball when he became the head coach recruiting camp. And that was something that a bunch of buddies and I went and did. So it's, again, crazy full circle going to that camp as a high school senior. And 8 years later, showing back up to be the first ever head strength and conditioning coach. It was the first opportunity for me where I was like flown in for an interview. And for me, that felt about as big time as it was, because for UIS, it was more of a phone call, and it was like, all right, sounds good. You start in 4 days. And I was like, sounds good. So I packed my stuff up and drove up there. So it was a little easier at the time. I could just pack my Suburban up. So it was a really cool experience for me to see that. And I think that's what kind of led me to the decision to again, jump in with 2 feet. Was they were committed to do it, and they were committed to create it the right way, instead of like a lot of people who want to create it with kind of just their toes in the water instead of diving in. And that was the question I asked them on the interview, was like, what's the commitment level look like? Is this something that you're just trying to add to kind of check a box, or is this something that you guys really wanted to offer that's really different? Because especially in our conference, we're kind of split between the Collegiate Conference of the South, which is a new conference that's split off from the USA South, which some of our sports still partake in. But we're one of the only schools between those 2 divisions that have strength conditioning. So for me, it's like a really awesome opportunity to jump in and make an impact from day one, because it's not like I have a lot of competition. So that was something that, again, was super intriguing. And again, finishing up kind of year 2, we're finally starting to just see a little bit of those impacts. And again, it takes 2 years to see a little bit. And I think that's something that I was a little more shocked on. I was expecting to jump in 6 months, you know, we were going to see all the differences. And I think that's part of the growing and maturing process of that. It really is a slow cook. It's not a thrown on high and get it done in a couple minutes type deal.
Yeah, no question about it. That was something that I definitely experienced while I was at center as well. As it took 4 years, and that was about the time that I left. And I remember thinking, wow, we finally got it to a point that's right. But it takes that long to finally get that right. So it's been fun to come back and to see the continued growth of the department and the buy-in from coaches and all that, because I can still think back to 2017, which I'm sure you're going to do here in 4 or 5 years, and go, wow, I remember when we first started this thing, and trying to get teams on board and do those different types of things. So talk to us a little bit about Piedmont. Talk to us a little bit. You already started talking about geographically, but just for our listeners, tell us where we are, kind of what conference. I know you said you're split right now. What conferences you guys are between, and then some of the sports that you guys offer there.
Yeah. So, ironically, as a college football player, I haven't trained a college football team since 2018. That's something that, again, when I'm sitting down talking to my college roommates about what's it going to look like 5 years from now, I told them, again, my goal was to be a head strength coach. And I didn't say a head football strength coach. I didn't say a head basketball strength coach. I didn't say a whatever. And for me, again, I wanted to get to that point where I was kind of making the call, and I wasn't necessarily being influenced by anybody else. And so for me, that led for a lot of Olympic collegiate strength and conditioning positions. So getting to Piedmont, again, no football at Piedmont, 22 other sports ranging from your basketballs, your lacrosses, your soccers, cycling, track and field, golfs, the whole nine. Competition cheerleading just got added. So again, being the first and only there person right now. Luckily for me, our track and field programs, with their certification, they do have a strength and conditioning kind of piece of that. So that's something that coming in, they were kind of on board with just continuing with what they were doing, which again, I think initially I was like, whoa, hang on. But then luckily I kind of allowed my ego to take a step back, because the realization of, I do have 19 sports that do come through, and I don't know if I would have been able to do it without their help. So kudos to them as always. But luckily for us, we had some sports that were investing their time and power into, and those were the sports that when I got there were from day one on board. My position was created because of, and I think this is something that Coach Jim Peoples, our athletic director, has a really good grasp on, is he does like an end of the year questionnaire with a lot of our kids. And for multiple years, their biggest complaint was that they wanted to have more of a Division I, Division II experience. And part of that included strength and conditioning, which was something they asked for. So coming in, again, I'm coming into a position that is wanted. And it wasn't like and I think this is something that a lot of people deal with, and I deal with a little bit still. It's like anytime you have a new person, right? It's like, ooh, I don't know, there's a little pushback. I think it was a little easier coming in and being the first and only, because there's a little less comparison from that perspective. Mm-hmm. Luckily, they were doing stuff, like I think our coaches did a great job providing something for them to do, because obviously it is incredibly important from an injury reduction perspective at the very least. So again, the early day buy-in for me was, I think, the easiest part, and which is usually the hardest part. So for me, I think I had a little step up from everybody else, but we currently share a facility with kind of like our general population, student, staff, faculty, 2,700 square feet. And it was designed for rehab and geriatrics. I'm convinced. I've seen machines that I didn't even know existed, and we have them. I think we have some of the most high-tech Smith machines on the market. The barbell has knurling, it spins, it fixes in it slides back and forth. They're like $6,000 a pop. So it's interesting to come in, and luckily, again, I try to make a little bit better of an impact every year that I've been there. So we rearranged a little bit after year one and opened up the floor space a little bit to kind of, again, space is king when you're dealing with, shouldn't be, but close to 40 athletes at a time in a space like that. Just having space for them to be on is the name of the game. So, but for us, a lot of our sessions, we're kind of in a split level. So we have a basketball court down on the bottom part, which is like an intramural court. And that's where we'll warm up and do a lot of our injury prevention, speed work type stuff. And then we'll run up the stairs and get our weight room session type stuff in. Some teams run, some teams don't, but that's part of it. Again, like having 45 minutes in between classes to be able to get in and get out every single minute that we have, especially in season, is I need it and want it. So we try to limit the amount of extra time in between as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to us a little bit about Piedmont too, because I think this is going to be important, and you already started hitting on it. You've got 45 minutes in between classes, different things like that. How is the student kind of curriculum set up in terms of what are classes like? Are we running on the hour? What's the splits? Kind of different things like that, because I think it's going to be important when we start discussing your program in a little bit.
Yeah. So for the most part, our classes are your typical, like either 3-day a week, 50 minutes, 2-day a week, hour and 15. We do have some labs that run a couple hours. We also have some business school night classes that are once a week that are like from 5 to 9 p.m., which blows my mind. I could not imagine being a college kid sitting in a class until 9 p.m. I would have lost my mind. So for the most part, I would say, again, 90% of it's your traditional 3-day a week, 50-minute, 2-day a week, hour 15. so a lot of our programming, again, depending on the team, I don't like to do a whole lot of early morning stuff, but unfortunately, because I only have 12 hours a day where my brain functions. In the fall, baseball's a sport that I can kind of trust for the most part, that our guys will get to bed and wake up and be ready to roll. And they're a sport that, again, their coaching staff did a great job before I got there. They had a really awesome weight room culture before I really got there. It was something that was important, that they wanted and kind of appreciated. So it was easy for them, for us to be like, hey, we're going at these times. In the spring, we dropped the 6 a.m. lift, obviously, to try to just help out, even if it's that extra hour. But a lot of our training happens from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. is kind of the window of time. And for us, since we do share the space, I can't necessarily reserve space. So I basically put our schedule on the door, and I put numbers next to the team that's in there. So there's times where there's some teams that are split up, and I try to keep it, gender specific, because I know from a female perspective, like I would say 80% of the game for them is just to feel comfortable and safe in that space. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I want to make sure that I'm doing on my end. And I think that's the hardest part right now, with being kind of solo. And I do have some interns, which has been great. But not having a lot of prep time is because we basically go from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. almost every hour on the hour. So now there's times where the sizes are smaller, and that keeps the kind of wellness folks happy, because I'm sure initially when you look at the schedule, it's like, sounds good, this looks like an athletics weight room. So I have to find creative ways where, there's less than 10 people in here, so I just don't include that team lift on the schedule. That way it looks a little more open.
Right. Well, so now, do you oversee the fitness center as well? Is that something that somebody else does?
No, that's something that is kind of tied into our student life. So my position is tied into athletics, and so our head athletic trainer is an assistant athletic director of high performance. Mm-hmm. And then that high performance department is split between athletic training and strength and conditioning.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're not responsible for that, because at my role at center, we're in a similar situation where we are in the fitness center sharing with, now we remodeled it end of my senior year, first couple of years. Anyway. And so it looks a little bit more like a weight room, but there are things that, again, I agree with you. There are times where you look at it and you go, yeah, this was just definitely set up as a fitness center, not as a strength and conditioning or athletic performance or high performance model by any stretch of the imagination. So that gives us the broad overview of the day. So you're basically training kids on the hour pretty much all the way through. You're trying to, as best you can, do it as a team, but I'm sure with some of your smaller teams, you probably can group them together, right? If you've got a smaller golf team and a tennis team, try to get them going together, but you're looking at 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. At Piedmont, do you have an exercise science department where kids are getting undergraduate degrees in that?
Yeah, so that's something that's fairly new. My first year was also the first year of our Health and Human Performance Master's Program. That's headed up by Dr. Greg Ryan, which I think he was probably a huge reason why I actually went to Piedmont, because, he's the NSCA state director for the state of Georgia. And having somebody like that at a school the size of Piedmont, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, if I'm going to ever create a relationship with academics, it's got to be at a place like this. Obviously, the strength and conditioning side of things is my passion and what I want to do, but the teaching side of things is something that I think helps both areas for me. So it's kind of like obviously I don't have help coming anytime soon. So for me, it's how can I invest a little bit of the extra time that I have into those programs. That way I could possibly have people, starting their sophomore year, realize that this might be something I want to do. But then that also feeds into our 14-month Health and Human Performance Master's Program, which I think is super unique. Again, being able to be done with a master's program in 14 months and apply for jobs compared to having to wait for 24. I think is incredibly valuable. And being able to learn from a guy like Dr. Ryan is, again, I think something that when you pay the $27,000, that's what you're paying for. So it's worth it. Obviously, I'm biased, and then getting to work with our athletes. I don't know if there's another place like that, and I think it's super unique. And we've now had, in the 2 years since I've been there, we've had 6 people go through that. We have finishing up our last 3 people finishing up that program now. So we have 3 people out doing 2 that got done with our exercise science, undergrad exercise science programs out as GAs. We have a grad school graduate, and then we'll have this year 3, one of which will open up a private facility here in town. The other one will probably get into college strength and conditioning as well. And then the other one's going to be kind of more of a small school baseball coach who is going to have to, because he's going to be he's kind of a smaller school ideaed kind of person where he fits really well in. And strength and conditioning is something he's going to have to do, because they're probably not going to have it. So I think that's something that a lot of people forget about. That, I mean, even like our assistant basketball coach, like, always wants to kind of ask questions why, and wants to get into it because he knows he might want to be a high school head coach one day or go to a small college, and he's going to have to do that. And that's something that he'll have that background to do. So I think that's something that a lot of people kind of forget about, is you can get into the exercise science program or the master's side of things. And even if you want to coach a sport, like, it's good to have that background, because even if, let's say, you do go off to a bigger school, you at least have that a little bit of understanding when you have conversations with your strength and conditioning staff, that it's not like okay, I hope to God you know what you're doing, let's get rocking and rolling. It's, you have a little skin in the game to help your program know why, and kind of work more together cohesively. So I think that's something that's kind of coming and growing at Piedmont that I know that I have to utilize for additional help. And I opened up like a small training facility here in town to kind of help get those people, those grad students, more experience, because I can pay them through student work. But obviously student work's not going to pay the bills. So they go off and train the small clients that we do have to kind of help bridge the gap. But then I can also use that as an opportunity to get them both certified and then help me out at the school more. So like those 2 guys that I have, I mean, they're really like assistant coaches for me. We're sitting down and they're programming, and I'm, asking them why and doing all that kind of stuff. And they're running teams that they want to run. One of our grad students, Garrett Kinsey, he played football with us at Barry as well. And he's somebody who's like, man, I don't have a lot of background in female sports, and working in the private sector, that's something that I'm going to have to know. So that's something I can, again, we have 19 sports. There's plenty of teams that we can get him in with. And then another one, Dalton Mueller, he's a basketball player for us. He just finished up, and he's going to be someone who's going to need to know how to program and get ready for a softball team, because that's something he doesn't, think about, or women's lacrosse, to have that knowledge. So I'm excited to see kind of the next stages of my neck is finally above water a little bit. So I'm not having to tread as much, and I'm able to kind of disperse out and kind of continue to grow this thing.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm really excited to see what that looks like for you in 2, 5, however long you end up at Piedmont, however many years out that is, because that's a really unique thing that still I wish Center had, that I always think back on, and always makes this tough because it's so liberal arts. They don't have any of those exercise science, even undergraduate stuff. So I'm excited to see where that is able to grow, and just how you're able to utilize the help, right? I mean, and I'm sure you found this over your 2 years of working there, is being able to find some of that help is huge. I mean, just if nothing else, for your own sanity, right? Like, you want the athletes to be trained better and all of that, but sometimes just for your own sanity, be able to take a deep breath and go, okay, now my head's not just above water, but I've got my whole waist above water, right? Like I'm moving in the right direction. So
yeah, it's funny.
Go ahead.
I took for granted for a long time. I took for granted during those early that first semester, when I finally got some help, to be able to allow them to do a warm up and take 10 minutes to go eat lunch or use the bathroom. Stuff like that is one of those things that you don't really think of, but I mean, that can be the difference between surviving through the day or thriving through the day. So that was something that I kind of had, again, take a step back and realize that something I always think about is what happens if I'm not there? And if I really do create the department that I want, if for whatever reason I'm not there that day, can things still continue? And I think that's something that, again, is kind of a double-edged sword, because then people think, well, then why are you that important? But again, I think goes to show how much legwork I did early on to kind of get that system in place to where our athletes can, and if they ever need to, can get what they need to out of it, to where it's not dependent on me. Because think about that from a business side of things. They always say that's the number one thing to never invest in, is the person or the company that only has the one person who knows how to do it. Because what happens if for whatever reason they die, and then your company's gone? Mm-hmm. So that's something that I have been really trying to, and it has developed that way, and have been super lucky because of it.
This makes me think of this point here is, at Piedmont, do you guys have summer classes?
So we do, but we probably have maybe 25 to 30 kids on campus during that summertime, because we do have a nursing school, and our nursing program is huge. And that's something that those first year nursing students kind of, instead of having to have jam-packed fall and springs, and even though they still have jam-packed fall and springs, it's a little more realistic, because that they get their feet wet a little bit that summer. And that's something that I take advantage of from a training perspective, because usually they'll have a window where they'll go from 9 to 2 and then they're open, or from 8 to 11 and they're open, to where we can get, I train maybe 5 to 6 hours a day in the summertime. And that's, again, something that's super unique, that I hope over time we continue to take advantage of, because that's not what happens in a lot of Division III schools.
No, right. Well, and that was going to be, and it's kind of twofold then. So, and that's what I was thinking when you were describing how you needed to have it run on your own. My continued thought that I always have at center, because center has no summer school classes, so all of my kids are gone. And the NCAA rule is once they're gone, you can't train them. You can provide resources for them, and we'll look at your program here in a second. You use Team Builder, so it's great because they can pull it up on their phone. But if you do not create individuals that can function on their own, then when they go to the summer, then they're just blowing in the breeze, right? And now we're struggling to be able to figure out what they're doing, right? They don't know the name of said exercise or sets and reps or different things like that. And then they either give up on it, don't do it, and then now you're building an uphill battle, right? And so, I think it's so important. I agree with you. And it was something that I learned after I left center. And went to Mercer County High School for these 18 months, now going on 2 years, is can I create a system that independently of me can run? Now, what will happen is yes, you're right. My job is to keep the train on the tracks, right? It may slowly deviate off if I'm not there for long enough, and I'll need to push it back on track. And I don't expect to be gone every single day, but for some odd reason, death in the family, something happens, outside of my control, they got to be able to continue and move forward and function. And that was huge for me in my transition into Mercer. And now coming back to center is something that I really want to make sure that I'm a big proponent of, because it's huge. If you can teach them, it goes back to what is the old adage. You can, if you give somebody food, if you give somebody a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach them how to fish, you can feed them for a lifetime, right? It's the same thing. That's our goal. And then that was my second point to it is, I don't know about you, but for me, most of these athletes that I'm working with at the Division III level, and again, we're both products of this, we're done at 22. We may get lucky and go to 23 because there's a master's program, we get a fifth year and something weird like that, right? But we're done at 22, 23. We're not going to be professional athletes. And my big selling point that I've always had, whether it be at the high school or whether it be at the colleges, yes, I'm here to prepare you for your athletic endeavors, but I'm here to be a catalyst as well for lifelong wellness. Because you look at something like the pandemic that just hit, a lot of people that had complications, there were a lot of people that just weren't healthy. And that's the joys of what we get to do. We get to impact kids for 4 more years and continue to teach them that a little bit more. So anyway, I went on a tirade. I hijacked that one. I apologize. But yeah, it's always interesting to me to talk to D3 coaches about it. Okay, let's turn to programming real quick. I won't ask you just yet to share your programming, but give us a 1,000-foot overview of kind of how you think about it, right? Because you're talking about training 480 kids, what did you say, 22 sports? Is that right? That's a lot of volume to deal with. So there has to be, you have to have some type of system that you go through. So give us in your mind how you think about it when you sit down, just general template wise, where you start so that you know that you can be able to get your kids the best of what they can get in that 45 minutes that they're with you.
Yeah. So for me, and this was something that I learned in the private sector, was I kind of have created 3 main groups for programming for us. So even though sports are combinations of both, you kind of have a major mover. So for us, I have overhead, rotational, and power athletes. Those are kind of the 3 kind of areas and those are the programs that I create and design, and then those sports kind of funnel into those. And then we make small changes from an in-season or off-season training model. And some things will change a little bit too in the future, to where I can maybe start to work with a little bit more individualization from a sports perspective, because I've gotten to the point now where, again, I think there's some teams who, from a very general, and again, we're working with Division III athletes. So general strength training was something that really worked for everybody. And we're getting to the point now where there's some of our teams who can and would benefit from maybe something a little bit more individualized for where they're at in their training. So, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and so on. So some of that kind of stuff might change. And the idea behind it would be, to make it simple on me, it would still be like, we're saying we're going to squat today, but maybe the kind of the phase 0 or the beginner levels might have a goblet squat, whereas the intermediates might have a back squat. And then our advanced kids who have been with us for their seniors or 5th years are doing some sort of either like accommodating resistance or velocity-based training type deal. So that's kind of how initially, again, very broadly is I kind of had them in those categories. And so like for me, baseball, the lacrosses, their programs look, the same compared to small differences for basketball, softball, and then so on and so forth. So I usually maybe make anywhere between 4 to 5 different programs. And then those teams kind of funnel in to where they're at, again, either overhead, rotational, power, and then in season, out of season.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And I think that was one thing that I struggled with. And again, I was 24 when I first took over in 2017 and didn't completely understand it, but learned quickly when you're working with, we've got 600 student athletes across 24, I think is what we're at now, 24 varsity sports. And it's just a lot. And you got to realize that, and again, the more that I've been in it, the longer I've been in it, we're at GPP, general physical preparedness, and we are trying to help make them a better athlete through making them better general athletes, right? I mean, at the end of the day, a squat is a squat, and just like you described, a goblet squat, a back squat or front squat, and then some type of accommodating resistance, they're all squats, but how you layer them is going to be the important part for the athlete to be able to give them what they need so that they can start working on things. Again, that first one may just be learning how to squat, because you're right, the Division III kid, you think that they're college kids, and then you all of a sudden realize, wow, these kids have literally never lifted a weight once in their entire lives. This is the first time I'm ever going to see them squat. But then you got some that are really advanced and maybe need something a little bit different after they reach a certain threshold of strength. So, okay, let's do this. Let's go ahead and pull up your program just so that we can start kind of combing through it. And you can talk to us about maybe how that 1,000-foot overview starts funneling into something a little bit more specific.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So can you see this, Coach?
Yep, I got women's lacrosse.
All right, perfect. Awesome. So year one, and again, as an athlete, I was kind of old school from the idea of I liked paper, tactile. I liked to see, write down what I did. So year one, I printed off probably close to 2,500 sheets of paper, and realized, wow, that's pretty expensive. So for me, and it's ironic too, because it makes my job incredibly easier now as well from a programming perspective, having something like Team Builder, where we pay basically an annual subscription, and then we bought iPads to kind of deliver those that training to our kids as well. And it was still significantly cheaper than printer and paper ink, or paper and printer ink. So for us, it was a no-brainer, and it's also an awesome opportunity for us to kind of get our coaches involved a little bit more, to see exactly what's going on. So just from a programming perspective, when we're looking at this from a women's for our women's lacrosse team here, they are considered for us an overhead sport. And again, are they a rotational power overhead sport? Absolutely. But for us and how our team is made up from common injuries in the past, they fit really well in that overhead idea. So this is kind of something similar from an in-season perspective that some of our other, like our men's lacrosse team would do. There's just some small changes again because of the days of the week. So like for them, they train Monday and Thursday. Now, was that because the science says that's what's best? No, because that's when their schedules are actually the easiest. Right. I think Division III, that's the name of the game. It's not as much what the piece of technology or the science is telling you is the best. And I wish that was the case, and maybe one day, but right now it just seems like for this specific team, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, either they play a lot of midweek games when they do have midweeks on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Fridays are travel days for them a lot of times when they're going on the road. So Monday and Thursday were 2 days that we identified as consistent times where they also weren't buried from a school perspective. So because they're in season, they're a team that I kind of look at and utilize that an in-season kind of training model that's kind of been popularized by Fergus Connolly in his Game Changer, the Process book, was where I was initially pointed to. Again, this was something that Chris Lowe kind of introduced to me, and again has made programming a little easier for me. So for them, a lot of times this Monday is going to be a game day -2 for them, with Sunday being a travel day back on away games, or an off day for them. So coming in, we focus on, Olympic movements, and for women's lacrosse, they're a team that is 100% bought in and invested in strength and conditioning. And I kind of tell them they're maniacs all the time, but they come in, energy is always high. They just want so much. So they're a team they're one of my only teams that I actually consistently program Olympic movements with, because they are consistent year round with that, even in the summertime. And they're one of the only teams on campus that I've taught the snatch to and stuff like that, because they are just so demanding. And it's in a good way, not in a bad way. So for us, again, when you're looking at this, the full RPE for me is a daily questionnaire that I have access to pull up to see where we're at. And again, I can kind of see a lot of the bumps and bruises, and something that actually I never really thought of from being a male athlete. And I never thought of this being a male just in general, but when I found out from one of our fellow female strength coaches that I worked with, they mentioned to me that 80% of injuries for females happens during their like period, the time of the month for them. Mm-hmm. And I never, again, that doesn't even pop in my brain as something that's got to be important, because I don't have that happen. But so that's something that I obviously, again, know they're females, and maybe if I had a female strength coach, it'd be easier for them for her to ask that question. But instead, what I do is I use that questionnaire, and some of the questions, it's how many hours of sleep did you get? What's your motivational level? What's your fatigue and stress levels look like? And then I explain to them the reason why I ask what their weight is as well. because I can kind of put 2 and 2 together when that stuff happens, especially in a team sport setting, because typically you see it across all of them. So that's something that, again, I can pull back a little bit from a volume perspective to keep them from overdoing it, because when they overdo it, that's the reason why they typically see those injury levels go up.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's something that, I mean, I had conversations, and that was a game changer for me. Like that's got to be talked about more and popularized and be familiar with as a male strength coach, because that can make or break your season working with female athletes.
No question.
So moving on from there, obviously, just
real
a
quick,
typical.
If you don't mind, I got two quick things for you to ask you. How do you, on your back end, do you view those RPs, and how quick are you making real time decisions with them? Does that make sense? Like, are you viewing them as they come in, and then you're going around to athletes and say, hey, I noticed this, or we're going to pull this back, or are those conversations that you're just having, and then you've got the data to kind of back it up? Does that make sense, the question I'm asking there?
Yes. Yeah. So they come in, and that's, if you look at it, so we do they don't have access to the iPads until they get upstairs.
Okay.
So we do the dynamic warm up downstairs. They come up. That's the first thing that they do. They punch in. And when I go over the lift, again, Team Builder is incredibly easy to where it's 2 buttons. It's Coach's Tool, reporting, and then bang, sports science. And I can see everybody's questionnaire responses right away. So it's kind of a combination, both in real time and just from having conversations with them, because like, this is a team who, you know, like I can kind of tell from an energy level when things are going on, and then I can just pop it up and see, and then it's boom. Okay, we're going to cut a set today from everything. And that's all it is. It's not like we can't do these exercises, or we have to do this specific. It's, hey, we're going to cut some volume down today. We're going to drop a set. And then all they think is, oh, we're just doing a little less volume today because we're in season or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Just go ahead and keep going there.
No, you're good. Yeah, and again, just if you need me to, just interrupt, since I can't necessarily see your face on my end. But so moving forward again, I always kind of program in this A block is something where throughout all of our teams is a like injury prevention / personal recovery block exercise accessory for that main movement. Unless we're doing some sort of type of like triple set where we're doing some potentiation and stuff like that. But for the most part, so like here for us, we have a lot of, and again, because of the nature of lacrosse, we have a lot of wrist and tight forearms and elbows and triceps, and all that kind of stuff can lead to some possible anterior shoulder issues down the road. So for us right here, a really important stretch for us, which will also help us in the hang clean as well, or the power clean, is a kneeling forearm stretch again, which is just a normal where we're sitting back and stretching the forearm, nothing groundbreaking or anything like that. But moving forward with the in-season model, for us, the dumbbell reverse lunge is a very dynamic movement. We do a lot more static split squats, either really early on when we're still kind of in the preparation phase, or in the off season, we're really hammering the static unilateral lower body movements. And then in season, we start to get a little bit more dynamic. So for us, just taking that split squat and putting it into a reverse lunge to add that dynamic movement helps us more in season. And then again, quadruped T-spine rotation, quadruped, fancy word for on your hands and knees. And then T-spine rotation to make sure that those overhead rotational movements are staying and we're not seeing any issues from the obliques, or we're also starting to work on some hip and shoulder separation stuff as well. Mm-hmm. And then something that is more kind of new and for the way that I program is this kind of the last block, and it's across every single program that I design. And a lot of coaches will notice it right away, but it's a Poliquin set of a 6, 12, and 25. And for me, that's really just an organizational piece. But it's also typically where a lot of our accessory works are. So for this instance, we're working on a little body armor and some shoulder health, but then also Being females, they typically, and when we do a movement screen at the beginning of the fall, that was something that we identified as a lot of really weak hips, glute medis, hip abductor, adductor. So we have that built into the program because my goal is to see at the end of the spring some of those things change eventually over time. Because again, if we're not testing it, that's something that I think Cal Dietz always talks about is, how can we say our program's really working? We have to have a piece of tangible, like, proof that something is actually working.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then, so what does that lead us into? What does that then start leading us into day two, right? So and I should have asked this from the beginning, so I'm gonna make us backpedal a little bit here. Typical schedules, because I know it's different for everybody, right? Like at center, because of where we're located and where our conference is, we are at minimum 4 hours away, at maximum 12 hours away from our in-conference opponents. So that means that we play pretty much only on the weekend. We may have an occasional in week game, but primarily we're on the weekend. So we can do a lot of our stuff during the week. What does the schedule look like? And you mentioned it briefly, but I just wanted to bring it back up again. Is what does the schedule typically look like for most teams? And I know I'm talking generalities here, but just in generalities, painting with a big broad brushstroke, what does is it a Wednesday, Saturday schedule typically? Do we have some midweek games? How many games are we playing on a weekend?
Yeah, so I would say probably 90% of our sports do play midweeks in some sort of capacity, either non-conference or the nearby conference games. We do have a couple of sports that cannot play on Sunday for religious reasons. So those sports we typically have to play either Friday, Saturday, and then the other sports we can play Saturday, Sunday. But then also to kind of alleviate those issues, we do have midweeks. Off the top of my head, every single sport that I work with, maybe minus cycling, obviously competition cheer, has some sort of midweek competition. So usually though, they're like Tuesday, Wednesday. Golf will play some Monday, Tuesdays. So I kind of try to find days instead of like trying to find the best days to train based on how many days we are from game day. I look at it as I look at the whole calendar and I try to find the days that make the most sense, that are the least affected because of travel and games and community service or whatever it is. So again, for women's lacrosse, it's Monday and Tuesday, or Monday and Thursday. For other sports that are in season, we can like baseball is a sport that we can typically get in 3 days a week. Depending on if we're playing a midweek, it might slide to a different day. So for the most part, our in-season teams train twice a week, with the exception of baseball. And then our off-season teams are typically 3 to 4 days a week, because again, they're not traveling as much. So we can do a little bit more from a microdosing perspective over the entirety of the week, instead of hammering them for 2 days and say, you have 3 days to recover, see you when you show back up.
Right, makes sense. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to derail us that, but again, I completely forgot to ask. Again, I've been so used to interviewing high school coaches where high school teams just play all the time. Like that's just the reality situation. Where colleges, you're traveling distances, and for some it's an hour or 2 hours, and you can do it during the middle of the week, and then others are, again, in our situation where it's 12, and we just added in Trinity and Southwestern to our conference starting in 25. So now we're talking about playing rights, right? And that's going to change how I've got to start thinking about programming as well. So anyway, what does day two now look like after we've got day one under our belt? What does day two start to look like?
Yeah, so for us, typically Thursday, again, for the most part, especially this time of year, because we're in conference play, with some small changes with midweek games. This is our game day -2 lift. So this is our a very dynamic speed day, plus kind of some of our more tactical, sport specific type things that we're working on. So again, we start with the warm up questionnaire. For us, we do barbell squat jumps, and I actually limit the amount of weight that they can do. I have a couple 300 plus pound squatter. So they're allowed to go a little heavier, and their max is 95 pounds. But for the most part, I care more about the jump height and how dynamic that movement is than I do the amount of weight. And it's funny because this is a team that they just love to come in and move weight. So like we just got off a velocity-based training block with them where we did a lot of high-speed stuff, and they were frustrated because they were like, Coach, this doesn't make sense. I have a 10 on the bar, and I normally bench press 125, 135 pounds. I'm like, I get it. But again, we don't swing 135 pound lacrosse stick. We swing a very light ounce lacrosse stick very fast. So you got to be able to do those kind of things as well. So for them, this is, again, a very dynamic, high-speed movement paired with a mobility exercise, again, that because these girls are so quad dominant, and especially when I get them, and it seems like nowadays I get more injured athletes coming out of high school than I do fresh, ready to roll their freshman year. So this is something that's trying to be proactive on limiting ACL and, quad type exercises or quad type injuries down the road. And then the rest of it, we do just some more body armor type stuff with the fat grip dumbbell bench presses. Shrug row rotate is going to be a shoulder mobility exercise for us. And then the landmine curtsy lunge is kind of it's a sagittal plane movement, but it's also kind of rotational in aspects as well. So it simulates in their sport really well, but then also I use it in season more as a weighted mobility movement, whereas on the off season, this is something that they would load up. So it's an exercise that they know. And that's the biggest thing I think with in-season programming is programming things that they know for the most part, because the stuff that they don't know is the stuff that makes them incredibly sore.
Yep. Yes. No question about
and
that.
And then the rest of it.
That's something that as I've come back. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Coach.
No, you're good. The rest of it's just injury prevention. And then almost every single one of my teams at some point in the week, and multiple times a week, do some sort of long duration isometric hold, depending in the joint area that they need it the most. To again, work more of the tendon health instead of where plyometrics are great from a tendon performance perspective. The long duration isometric holds do an incredible job. And again, a lot of the stuff that I get from doing this is from Jake Tura, jacked athlete on YouTube, is elite. So that's something that my athletes do as well from a tendon health perspective.
What would be again, women's lacrosse makes sense, right? The volume of running that they've got to do makes sense that you're going to hit something lower body, split squat, iso hold. What would something look like that you might do if you were a different athlete? And I'll let you pick the athlete. I won't pigeonhole into it, but that might be some type of isometric tendon health that you would use.
Yeah. So like for him, for this team, a little not as long, but we do some timed hang from the upper body stuff. We'll do a knee drive with the for the hip flexors. We'll do a lateral leg isometric for the glute med, posterior hip. Again, a lot of the sports that I deal with are ground based, so they're going to have, a high lower body implementation. So it's something that I think the upper body really gets a lot of work, like with baseball, especially. Like they do an absurd amount of upper body tendon, soft tissue work that I don't really need to do a whole lot of it unless it's personal when they stay after, hey, my pec's a little tight or I'm having some bicep tendonitis. Those guys know to stay after and we do stuff. But as far as the long duration isometric hold stuff, it's typically all lower body. I've done some like low push-up holds or high push-up holds before as well. Again, I just see way more benefit from an injury reduction perspective, doing the lower body stuff.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Again, it's been, I think I've said this after every person that I've interviewed so far. It's great to see just the variation, right? Like, again, I've seen the 6, 12, and 25 before, right? But I love how you implement it here. And I'm sure it's one of those things that your kids just know to expect it and it's coming up. And routines are huge for kids. And I say kids, but I should say adults as well. When they come into the weight room, like they know that they're going to get through sometimes. It looks as I'm looking at it, some type of power movement, some type of upper body strength movement, and then they're going to get into their 6, 12, and 25. If they know that that's coming, they're going to be, I have found, more bought in and ready to roll each time. And it takes some of the guesswork out of it. Have you found a similar thing? And is that why, not the sole reason why, but one of the reasons why you put it in there?
No, for sure. 100%. And I actually like to give them a little bit of autonomy too, as well with some of that stuff. Like for some of our off-season teams, we'll have something it's literally labeled arms, where they come in and you get to pick 100 reps of exercises, biceps and triceps, that you can do band, dumbbell, cable, whatever, plate, whatever rep range you want, just to give them a little freedom, or on some game day type stuff. There's some times where, again, like if we have one, so like men's lacrosse, for instance, they played one game on Tuesday this entire year. So I told coach, I'm like, it doesn't make sense for us to just stop training because of them. I can just change what we're doing. And I gave them a little bit of autonomy as far as like what we were doing. Like, hey, if you're feeling this today, then you should do this exercise. Or if you're feeling great and this exercise is going to be the best idea for you moving forward, go ahead. That autonomy is something that's super important. But to your point, yeah, I think it's something that our kids know what's coming. But it also helps me, like when people think of a John Delf program, like this is my identity. And what I talk to a lot of people about is, and my interns, like when you look at my program from the 1,000-foot view, it's a combination both of the tier system, combination of Poliquin system. So I take these pieces, Jake Tura's isometric stuff. I take these pieces that I really think there's value in, and making it into one program is what makes it the John Delf program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's huge. I mean, again, this was something that, again, I had tendencies of it when I was at center, but when I went to Mercer, really honed in on it. I'll tell you what, our kids then, I mean, and it's credit to them, right? But we talked about this earlier. Can the program run without you for a day or two? You know, I've put it under the stress test now because I'm working both jobs. And I am showing up late at Mercer, we have a kind of like a 0 hour for football, and that bleeds over into first hour. My kids now are at a point where we are so routine, and I don't want to be so routine that we can never change, but we were so routine, and I got it drilled well enough that they know where to find their sheets, where to hang them up, how to get through the warm up with our TV screen. And I mean, they have everything going, and now I get to sit back and I get to actually analyze it. Are we doing what we should be doing? And it's been a stress test because it's now a necessity because I'm not there all the time. And a football coach is having to oversee it, and he's helping with it. But I've got 4 or 5 student athletes that know exactly what's going on. And it's because of those routines that we develop, and they know what a Jeremy Carlson, you know, I like how you phrased it, a John Delf program looks like. They know what a Jeremy Carlson program looks like. They know some of the tendencies that are going to be in there, and they know why they're going to be in there as well. So that's awesome. Well, that was great. I really appreciate you taking us through that and being able to see what that looks like. And I'm sure that I know I've taken something away from it. I'm sure our listeners will as well. But as we start to kind of wrap up here, give us kind of where people can reach out to you if they're interested in learning more about how you program, maybe if they're interested in being a GA, coming to Piedmont, being able to do the 14-month master program. Tell us a little bit about where they can find you, reach out to you, different things like that.
Yeah, well, I'm on Instagram, Twitter. Instagram should be at John Delf-Mo, M-O. I'm sorry, that account got hacked. I forgot so it's John Delf-99 is my Instagram. I had to make sure because I knew that happened. And that's my Twitter as well, John Delf-99. I think the Strength Coach Job Network Discord is something that has been incredibly valuable for me. We do a lot of sharing. And I did a winter seminar this year. I think it cost $12 for the whole year. And then at the very least of it, we have probably, I say I don't get paid or anything. I just am part of it. 5 or 6 jobs a day are posted in that now, that you'll see like on Instagram and Twitter that you have to have access to, the Discord to get the more information. But I think, to be honest with you, the community piece of it's the best part. And I want it to be better, just because I do think that is the future. As much as I think the NSCA has done a really good job with their Facebook SIGs and stuff like that. Like, I know I don't get on Facebook all the time, and I'm sure the strength coaches behind me are going to never get on Facebook. So trying to keep up with the times, that Discord does a great job, because it is really a chat forum, and you can go back in time and look at a year from now, the conversation that you had. And like, I know I'm looking at that for people who, if they ever apply for jobs that I'm a part of, like, I know a lot of times I've already had a relationship with them through that Discord.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are hiring, like, that little piece of relationship can be the difference between making an impact or hiring again in 12 months.
Yep. Yeah, there's no question. Well, I'll have to go take a look at that, and I'm sure I'll try to link it in our bio or whatever I put at the bottom there in our stuff, so that you can I can redirect people to that. So that's awesome. Well, Coach, again, I appreciate it. I know we took up about an hour and 15 minutes, so I appreciate you taking the time and being able to log on and do this with us today.
No, Coach, thank you for doing this. And I mean, the time is valuable that you have doing stuff like this. And these conversations, again, I think the best thing to come out of COVID from our industry side of things is we're not a locked door type industry anymore. We're way more open. And luckily for me, that's the type of person that I am. So any of, the people listening to this, if it's something that, you want to question or just introduce yourself, my stuff's always open, and I love hearing from strength coaches and kind of where they're at moving forward. So thank you again for your time.